Hello everybody, this is Ryan over at High Carb Generator. Welcome to my channel. Today I wanted to talk about starch. Are we starchivores? Should we be eating starch? What does the Bible have to say about it? And I also wanted to talk about the idea that we are supposed to be hunting animals. So let's get started. So let's take a picture back in the day, and we are living in absolute paradise. Paradise. I'll put a picture of paradise here in my mind. And we're living in paradise. The fruit's on the trees. We don't really have to do much. We just wake up and eat and, forage and probably build houses or like places to stay, maybe explore the areas. The temperature is exactly where we need it to be. And then one day we decide, I know what we'll do. We'll move to the cold areas where we can't survive at all. We can't survive there. We can't thrive there, but let's move there anyways. I don't know why it happened. You don't see a whole lot of reason based on why we started expanding on the different areas that we were going to live in. But if you're going to do that, fruit is not going to be your main source anymore because fruit does not carry for very long. Yeah, you can dry bananas or you can dry, different other fruits, but at some point you're going to need some kind of other source. And that is where the starches came in. I think rice goes back all the way 10,000 years ago. They found dig sites with people that were eating rice. So it does go back quite a few years. And here's one thing. So everybody thinks we were hunter-gatherers, or which meant that we were hunting animals. But that doesn't make a whole lot of sense because animal meat and protein is not very predictable source, on top of the fact that it goes rancid very quickly. And when you are carrying animal byproducts, whatever it is, you are also, so predators, actual predators with nails, teeth, everything that can actually kill these animals, pleasurably to them, they're also going to be smelling the fact that you got other animals on you, and this is an easy feed. They can feed on you and they can feed on the thing that you're feeding on. So it made you even more of a target while you were going into the wild, moving to whatever areas you were at. So it was not a smart source. I'm actually going to put a video here that McDougall did about this.
And so what do we tell our friends and relatives who tell us that we're primarily meat eaters because we're hunter-gatherers, with an emphasis on hunter because that's the man thing to do, and gathering is the woman thing to do?
That's a myth. Hunters and gatherers, the majority of their calories come from plant foods. Yeah.
So
that's a myth. Hunters and gatherers, the majority of all the calories that any hunting and gathering population gets comes from its plant foods. So that's what's most reliable. Meat is just too unpredictable. You can't rely on it.
So as a summary statement, as an expert anthropologist, you've spent your whole life studying the human diet and its relationship to teeth and bones and chemicals and genes and so on. Your conclusion is the human being is a
starchivore.
Could I use that in my new book?
Okay, sure.
Thank you very much.
Sure thing.
Excellent.
Thank you.
So you have to bring something that, like rice or, all the bunker food, right? You have to bring the bunker food with you, which is the wheat, the rice, the millet, whatever else you can, barley, whatever else you can get your hands on. Beans dry really well. Potatoes, actually, I'll put a picture here in Himalayas in Peru. They actually freeze dry up in the mountains. They freeze dry potatoes and they last about 10 years. I've actually gotten some of these before. Some of the purple ones are really good. And so this kind of stuff will carry for a long time. So I don't know that we are truly not still fruitarian or frugivores, but we did develop some thousands of years now on the fact that we had to cook starches, and our digestive system apparently has gotten to the point where it can handle that. Now, I don't know how well, if you see, like Doug Lyle says, we developed our system to eat this kind of stuff. Is he right? I don't know. It's just a matter of, but the one thing I know we are not meant to eat is meat, dairy, and all that other not great stuff, because once you take that stuff out of your diet, all the cancers go. I mean, the China study proved this, and all of the other diseases kind of just disappear. Look at China in 1980s, prior to 1980s, when their diet was like 95% rice. They had almost no diseases. If you want to read up on that, or if you want to listen to it on an Audible, just get the China study. It's quite amazing. I'll put a picture of it here. I'll link it down below in the description section. Now, another thing that people say is, I hear a lot of people say is, the Bible says that we're supposed to be eating animals and all this, and I'm like, did you read the first 5 pages, bro? I'll put a picture of the Genesis 1:29. It says something along the lines of, you got to eat all seed-bearing fruit as your meat, and then the other one that people like to quote is that we have dominion over animals. But if you read further into the Bible, it also says that man has dominion over his wife, and I would like to think that means that we are supposed to protect our wives and women and children and animals and not slaughter and eat them. But the way society is going right now, I don't know if people have translated that very well. So I just, that point, I don't know. It just, and another point too. So I used to work at a post office that has a lot of Jewish people coming into the Hasidic, the curls and the everything, right? And the rabbis used to come in once in a while. I said, can you help me translate the Torah if I stop by the temple one time? He gave me a date, time, told me to slide him $100 bill, right? And just kidding. And so I went there, and I wanted to translate some of the stuff in the beginning of the Torah in Genesis, because I wanted to know what the actual Torah said about why we started eating cooked food. And the reason we started eating cooked food was because God was mad at us, because all we were doing was fornicating and eating and all that kind of, and not like spreading the message that we were supposed to spread. And so the Great Flood happened, and the Great Flood, you can see it in all civilizations. It most likely happened. And after the Great Flood, he didn't want us living any more than 125 years. Prior to that, if you read some of the early books of the Torah or the Old Testament, whatever you want to call it, people were living thousands of years. Some of them. And if you read some of the lost books of the Bible, they were living a long time. So he only wanted us living 125 years. And so he had us eating cooked food. Go figure. So you really have to dig more into that. Also, there's other stories in the Bible about a lot of the warriors and everything requiring that they only ate vegetables. They would not eat meat because they said it slowed them down. Another part of that is if you read a lot of the stuff with the ancient Japanese, the ninjas back in the day would go fruitarian before a great mission because they knew they wouldn't have any scent. Why wouldn't you have any scent? You would only have a scent if you can't digest something well. So they knew that they digested fruit very well. And so they would eat only fruit, and they would not be able to be sent. Nobody would actually sense them. I also found another McDougall video about the Barley Men, the Barley Men. So I'm going to play that here.
This is fun. This was a recent publication. This was came out about 3 or 4 months ago. Epiphysis, what is that? That's someplace in the Mediterranean. Turkey? Okay. Epiphysis. It was a famous place back in the old times for gladiator fights. They had coliseums and so on. And as a result, they had lots of gladiators. And what they were doing, what these archaeologists did is they were digging things up, as archaeologists do, and they found a grave site about 200 square feet. And in that grave site, they found 60 gladiators. And they analyzed these gladiators. In this case, they looked at the bones of the gladiators, and they looked at the mineral content, and they found they had a low zinc, high strontium content, which indicated that their diet was very, very, very vegetarian. In fact, they called it vegan.
All right, so welcome back. Another thing I wanted to talk about with the starches is if you go back to old dig sites, one of my favorite and one that I really hope to visit one day, even though my hiking skills aren't the best with this fake ankle of mine, is Göbekli Tepe. And then, Punku. There's just a bunch of ones that I want to visit. And, hopefully I've got somebody to go there with, to maintain my walking. But I'm going to put a picture of that here. This is like a 25,000-year-old dig site, right? And a lot of the same things that they just found in that video that I listed with, they were basically labeled vegan, is the same thing that was at this Göbekli Tepe in, the Turkey region. It's a very starch-based, very little animal protein diet. And this is how we got to these other areas. So, in my mind, yes, I guess we have developed a little bit to eat starches, but there's no denying that when you put somebody on a fruitarian diet that also has vegetables, not just straight up fruitarian, but also has vegetables in it, they thrive. The recovery is insane. Like I did it myself. I did it for Lent this year. My recovery was insane. It was crazy how fast that you can just immediately recover from things. And that also brings me to another point. I hope this is entertaining. If it is, give it a like, make comments down below, subscribe, share it. But if you also look at places like Egypt and England and different regions of the world where there was hierarchies, and the higher the hierarchy you went, the more meat that you ate, the less mortality went down. But the peasants who were feeding you and doing all your work were living a long time. They were skinny, slender, could get everything done, and they were just living on the grains, potatoes, and in the starches, basically, and fruit. I'm assuming in some of these regions, and they were thriving, whereas the royalty that was in charge of them were dying. So that's another thing that you find, especially if you pay attention to some of this older humanity. And one that really hits home to me, Ireland. I'm Irish. My ancestors came from Ireland not that long ago, and in the 1600s, the potato was introduced to Ireland around 1649, I think it was. The potato was introduced to Ireland, and before that they were living off very little. They were peasants, there was very little, money in the country, and the farming in Ireland is extremely hard because there's a lot of rocks. It takes forever to make a field. I mean, forever. And once the potato was introduced, the population doubled within 40 years. The men were averaging 12 to 14 pounds a day of potatoes. The women were averaging somewhere in between 8 to 11 pounds, I believe. And they were thriving. The population doubled within 40 years. So you add a ton of carbohydrates, and all of a sudden, the population doubles in 40 years. Also, look at something like China or Japan or any Asian country where it's predominantly rice or any kind of starch, like corn, rice. Some regions of Asian countries have potatoes. And think about, I'm going to put up a world population map here. Think about the population. Look at the population of the regions where the starch was, or sugar, or carbohydrate was the main source of calories, and look at the regions where the main source of calories was animals. It's a completely night and day of how much population there is. Matter of fact, when China wanted to make it only so you could have one kid, they introduced the Western diet. Why would they do that? They knew something, right? They don't just do anything in China without a reason. And so they introduced the Western diet. I did a video about how much the sugar affects the libido, and I'm actually going to play that here.
There was a human study demonstrating that adding a pound of sugar per day resulted in a drastic improvement of fertility in males. Now,
I can 100% agree. The libido, it goes up the more sugar you got in your system.
Why do I mention this? Because fertility in both males and females is actually one of the cardinal biomarkers of good health. It's considered an evolutionary luxury. Like if you're starving, fighting off a predator, or basically the environment is really not very beneficial, it's known that in both males and females, fertility drastically declines. In fact, very active female athletes have a now medical condition called the female.
All right, so welcome back. That's basically what I have to say. So if you really look at it, population doubles, and fertility only goes up in humans who everything else is working. If your body is working in harmony, your body will increase its fertility. It will increase the amount of volume that comes out. Okay. it increases everything. But if you are considered a famine state by your body, it's not going to put the energy into that. It's just not going to put the energy into that. So this is what we see with a lot of athletes. Like I think he mentioned, I don't know if I played it that long, but he mentioned that a lot of female athletes lose their periods, lose their ability to have kids, and some of them never regain it because they don't eat enough to maintain what they're doing because they got to be at a certain weight. And that takes a toll, and that toll may never be paid back. So it's called metabolic damage. I don't really want to go into it too much in this video, but in the video I just played, I went into it quite a bit, so I will link that here. And the last thing before I let you go, I also talked a little bit about, are we fruitarians or starchivores, when I interviewed Eli. He's a fruitarian, been fruitarian for 7 years. I'm going to play a little bit of that clip. Now, what do you think of the Nathan Pritikin or the Dr. McDougall, who says that we evolved to eat starches primarily, and you should eat 90% starch? Or if you look at the Asian populations prior to 1980, who lived basically 90% on white rice. What do you think of people who do that and are completely healthy? Mm-hmm. Do you think if somebody was healthy on that they would find benefit in going to a fruitarian diet, or do you think that we're actually meant to eat cooked food at this point? Do you think we have, quote unquote, evolved to that point?
Okay, so
that's a lot of questions. I know.
Yeah,
that was a loaded question, like a loaded baked potato, right?
Yeah. Okay. Excuse me as I scramble to put that in a context.
I can rephrase it.
Okay. All right. So, what do I think of the Nathan Pritikin approach, where it's like we are starch eaters? Okay, let me start.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah. No, we are not starch eaters. Yes. In terms of modern history, so if we go back in enough time in just the record of history that we conventionally have at our disposal, yes, we the successful populations were eating starches because it made the most sense given the environment that they had to live in, right? So humans were these tropical species, or these tropical animals that we've now migrated all over the world in all sorts of inhospitable habitats that are now no longer suited to our living, right? To our existence. Anyone can prove this. We are always simulating the tropics wherever we go. So if we wear clothes in the wintertime and winter coats and hats and whatnot, what you are doing is effectively simulating the tropics. You are trying to maintain a comfortable body temperature, right? Because that's what's comfortable for a human being. What can you do? There's no argument against this, right? We just don't do well living in the top of the Arctic, right? Mm-hmm. or the bottom of the Arctic, or just where the only place we can exist comfortably with just our skin and our birthday suits is in the tropics. Okay, this would lead us to believe that we are a tropical species. But because of our ingenuity, we have migrated all over the planet, and now we have to make do with an inhospitable environment. And when we've done that throughout history, it is required that we use the agency of starchy foods, or things that survive on the shelf or in canisters or fermented or whatever. We do all these things so that we can survive in this climate, in this environment where there's not abundant fruit and vegetables growing everywhere, right? Especially all season long. So yes, they're not lying. They're not misleading you in that sense. Humans have been doing that for thousands of years because they've had to. Okay. But because we've gone through a long period of emergency subsistence, still doesn't address what we're optimally designed to do. And what we're optimally designed to do, you can corroborate just with your own senses, right? If you just take those tubers and those starches and you just pop them in your mouth and try to eat them, they are not very attractive. They're not very palatable. They're not very pleasing. They do not excite your senses in any way like natural food for your system does, like the mango or the berries from the bush or the apple, the fresh apple growing from the tree, or fresh orange. Recently I had fresh oranges straight picked from the tree.
Oh, wow.
It incredible, incredible. No starch, no tuber will taste like that or excite your senses like that. Fresh orange from the tree. It's a
All right. So hopefully this video did you some good. Hopefully these videos did you some good. If it did, share it. But in my mind, yeah, starch is the way to go, because fruit is not the most sustainable sometimes. You know, like I got really lucky yesterday when I went to the Asian market. There was just, I don't know if you saw that short that I did. There was just fruit everywhere. I'm like, wow. So I bought a bunch of Thai bananas. I bought a bunch of other stuff. I can't even remember what I bought now. I was just grabbing stuff, throwing in the cart, and just it kept on going. But just keep this in mind. If you have fertility issues, if you have any other kind of, if you have metabolic damage, if you can't lose weight, if you're struggling to sleep, if you're on the keto, and that's another thing that I wanted to touch on real quick. So when you go on keto, which I have done, I did it for years. The first thing that happens is your muscles dump all the glycogen in the system, and everybody's like, "Oh, this is a miracle! I lost all this weight. I'm so happy." But what happened was your body dumped all of the sugar and glycogen that it was storing in the muscles, and you get flat, right? Your muscles get flat. If you ever talk to somebody who lifts or bodybuilds or anything, they talk about the pump. Well, the pump can only happen if you're hydrated and got enough sugar. So that's what happens. And then as soon as they start eating correctly again, they get bloated. And why does that happen? Because the body needs to recover from that. It was starving. It cannot survive off protein and fat alone. It is not built for that. You can look at the digestive enzymes in the system, and that alone will tell you, not alone that just our teeth and our digestive system, that we just can't process that stuff. I mean, you know, and the Asian countries, they allowed like a quarter pound of meat, like some of them like a day and some of them a week. And so they weren't having any diseases. But anyway, I digress. So if you're on the keto, if you're having trouble sleeping, if you're having trouble with fertility, this is something that you should at least try out. Did we develop to eat cooked food? I mean, I'll tell you this, I have no body odor whatsoever when I'm on raw vegan, and everybody I've ever talked to has been raw vegan for more than like 3 or 4 days knows that your body odor just disappears. But on cooked starches, it's there a little bit. So that means that it's not digesting as well as the fruit. So does that mean that we can eat cooked starches? Apparently so, because otherwise the Asians and the Africans and the Aztecs and the Mayans and whoever else, the Irish, when they were doing it, they wouldn't have thrived the way they did otherwise. So I guess, yes, we have somewhat developed to eat this stuff, but I still, in my mind, think fruitarian with vegetables is probably where we're supposed to be, but we can definitely thrive on starches. Hopefully this video did you some good. Share, like, comment, questions. Talk to you next time.